Hello, listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the AwardsWatch Podcast, episode 212. I'm the executive editor, Ryan McQuade. Joining us is our editor-in-chief, Erik Anderson.
Hello, hello, hello.
And our AwardsWatch contributor, Dan Bayer.
Hello, everybody.
We're going to talk a lot of movies today because there's a lot of holiday movies. Some are more holiday movies than others. We're going to just give some brief thoughts on The Iron Claw, The Color Purple, and Wonka. Wonka being Erik's favorite movie of the year. And Wonka. And but first, the big news this week is the Golden Globe nominations as well as the Critics' Choice nominations. It was a big week for nominations. A lot of obviously more critics prizes have been given out. Like Erik, who announced today? There were a bunch that were announcing today, right? Like Boston Online.
They were supposed to Saturday. They got delayed till Sunday, and then the Indiana winners got leaked.
Oh,
and because they aren't supposed to be till tomorrow. And those got posted by like me and other people, so we had to retract that.
St. Louis.
Yeah,
St. Louis. Yes, but I'm not caught up on St. Louis yet. There's so many things.
So many critics groups.
But all that matters is that Divine Joy Randolph has not lost.
Which is genuinely like, not that it's not a great performance, but when was the last time we saw someone sweep that hard?
Yeah, it's a weird place, and it's kind of a cool thing, and I love it, and I love at least having, maybe one of those every once in a while.
I mean, she's sweeping to the even a bigger almost level than Ki Kwan did last year for Everything Everywhere, because he did lose a couple of spots. Like I don't think he won National Board of Review, but she won't be nominated. He will win Indie Spirit. He won Indie Spirit, but she wasn't nominated for Indie Spirit, I believe, this year.
Yeah, she is.
Is she? She has everything. Oh, okay.
She's been nominated for literally everything.
I didn't know. Well, I didn't know. I'm worried. I was
technically lost was Gotham, and that is in a non-gendered category. So
it's a gender-neutral category.
For the finer point on it, anytime that it's been a supporting actress only category, which is 99.999% of the rest of the time, she hasn't lost. But it will be interesting to see once we get to the Spirit Awards way in March if it will be her or Charles Melton.
Yes,
that's way in the future.
But first we have to look at the Globes. And the Globes are always usually globing, but actually this year, in comparison to Critics' Choice, they were actually the better of the nominees overall. Inclusion of international features as well as just not just in film, but also in the collective acting nominees as well. But no surprises really. I think in terms of the films that were in there, Barbie led the day with 9 nominations, followed by Oppenheimer at 8, Poor Things and Killers of the Flower Moon with 7, Past Lives though with 5 nominations, and then with 4 was May December, Maestro, and Anatomy of a Fall. And the best pictures, which are divided by drama and musical and comedy. The drama nominees were Anatomy of a Fall, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, and The Zone of Interest. We should also note that there are 6 nominees in each category at the Globes. They have expanded that this year from their usual 5 in the past. And over in musical and comedy, there was Air, American Fiction, Barbie, The Holdovers, May December, and Poor Things. Erik, I'll start off with you. Let's talk Globes first before we get into Critics' Choice. Your just thoughts on the way that these kind of shook out. I mean, these are the big first televised event of the year, and they'll be in early January, and they looked pretty good to me. What about to you?
Well, I think this year's Globes nominations, everybody was going to be really, really keen on how things were going to shake out because so much has happened in the last couple of years with membership and scandals and everything kind of coming to a head for them. And that also included the additional spot in each category. It included allowing animated films to be in drama or comedy. It in foreign language films to be in drama or comedy in the very top spot. So the last couple of years has seen so much change, and I think anybody wanted and hoped that the changes that they made were going to be positive ones, because it was pretty horrible, no black members, and just uh, a very obvious amount of scandals looming, and historically with bribes, and just so how easy it is to curry favor with less than 90 people all in one spot. So the elimination of and expelling of some members, redoing the board, splitting the Globes entirely. There's no such thing as the Hollywood Foreign Press Association anymore. That's gone.
Yeah.
So now it is still the philanthropic side of the Globes, and it is the awards side, which is also now a Penske-owned property.
I was just going to say the Penske media angle of it
So
all.
now it's a money-making venture, more so even than it was before. And they're on CBS for the first time in 40 years. So clearly things are moving in the direction that the Globes certainly want them to be. Not that they won't be without, current, upcoming, future scandals, because they just wouldn't be the Globes without them.
Yeah, at time of recording, they had one a little bit also with a ticketing system for their voting membership. I mean, they every time they always take a step forward, it's also a sidestep or a step right back. But that's how it always is in a transition period, especially for their older members who feel a certain sense of entitlement about tickets, new members that are made promises that are certainly then fluid and guaranteed. But with it being on CBS, Erik, and given the fact that this year has so many stars, it's going to feel like a really old throwback to before the pandemic for the first time for them to have like Leo or Bradley Cooper or all these big stars, or Margot Robbie, Ryan Gosling, Jennifer Lawrence, all these big stars in the room for the first time, because like they didn't have. They did it over Zoom for 2020, and then they had it off air in 2021 completely, and then last year. It was, there were some stars didn't even go. Like Cate Blanchett won Best Actress. She was in London for the Tar premiere rather than going to the Globe. So a lot of notable stars were kind of worried about the new system, and I think this year is it seems like with this whole ticketing thing, it seems like Hollywood's ready to go full on back to the Globes on CBS in early January.
Jennifer Lawrence is so excited about that warm Chardonnay.
Her Globe nomination reaction was as Jennifer.
Get us some ice. Get us some ice cubes. Get us some ice cubes.
It was great. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
But to getting to the nominations, the thing that I think we were all really looking forward to is how these 200 plus new members were going to change or impact the kind of things that we see. And we really did see that, because we did see Anatomy of a Fallen Zone of Interest in motion picture drama, and the fantastic nomination in female actor in a musical or comedy, the Alma Poitsi.
Yes.
Poitsi. Fabulous. I mean, that's the kind of thing that only comes with the kind of new members that are in the Globes now, which I know of quite a few of them. I think I know like 15% of all the new members. Know them.
Erik's elitist.
20 years. So it's really cool. And these are like cinephile people.
Yeah.
These are not the HFPA.
I want the swag. Put me on a hot air balloon, Eddie Redmayne, all that kind of stuff.
And they also don't live in Los Angeles, which is another one of the new
it's a good thing.
Things implemented in the Globes, is that you don't have to be a foreign journalist based in LA, which again made it so much easier to bribe and cajole and
put together events.
the wheels.
Yeah.
Events and stuff like that. So it just I think we saw something much closer to what we were hoping it was the Globes could turn into and become. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I do. I'm going to give it over to you, Dan, because Dan always, I ask the questions that I can't answer myself. So Dan's going to be able to answer this one for me.
Sure.
Dan, what the fuck is cinematic and box office achievement category, and how that they have still not announced any criteria for this category whatsoever?
Yeah,
It's
they
just
did. They announced tons of it.
okay. So what was it then, Erik? You can explain it to me, because this was the category again. That's one of those desperate Oscar moves, right? Like the thing that we saw a couple of years ago with the Snyder Cut one, and the Johnny Depp movie was nominated or whatever. Like this is just it seems really desperate, and also it just seems like to hedge their bet in case Barbie or Oppenheimer loses an award.
I don't know if it was that, but no, I mean I don't want to take from Dan. So Dan, go ahead, and I'll come back with the description of this category.
Okay. But Dan, what do you think of a category like this? This is kind of globesy, isn't it?
I mean, look, whatever the description, whatever the official description of it is, we know that the real name of that category is Please Watch Our Awards Show. We Like Popular Movies Too award. That's all it is. That's all it is. That said, I actually don't. I think that like when you look back at the like what the stories were at the box office this year, I think this is a really good representation of that. The only thing here that I really kind of like cocked my eyebrow at a little was, oddly enough, Mission Impossible, which like did okay at the box office, but like was not great. But then again, it's like, well, what obviously they're defining box office achievement as just making a lot of money, like how we have done with our box office game that we've done. It's all been on just straight money, not multiplier from your budget, because otherwise something like Past Lives probably should be in this category, considering how long that played in theaters and how well it did.
Asteroid City had a good box office multiplier. I mean, a movie that I thought it could and should have been in here was something like Creed 3, which was a movie that made a ton of money.
It was there were 18 films.
Yeah, it was very surprising. Like, I mean, like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, that's not surprising. Or even like Mission Impossible. There were all these articles about like how it's losing money or it's not really that much of a success. But Creed 3, I mean, it proved, I mean, it was also a debut film for director, Michael B. Jordan, but then also like that movie was buried in the middle of March or April or whatever, and it made a ton of money. And just like John Wick, and it made a ton of money. Those little stories were what kind of kept the engine going before we got to Barbenheimer. You know what I mean? So, and yeah, I mean, Super Mario Bros. That makes total sense. Spider-Verse, obviously. I mean, like, obviously trying to get Taylor Swift in the room with the Eras tour, but it also did make a ton of money. It made a ton of money.
And honestly, like when you're talking about box office achievements this year, I feel like those are the stories. It's Barbenheimer and the Eras tour. Like those are the box office stories of the year. And Super Mario Brothers and honestly, like Boy and the Heron coming on strong in the last weeks of the year is also a big story box office wise. But again, that's too small for this kind of
I also even
think category. But
I mean, even Killers of the Flower Moon making the money that it did for a movie that's like a 3.5 hour movie, and it's made over, it's going to make like 150 million for a streamer that they have no, like, I mean, obviously there's not, it's probably going to prioritize a theatrical only thing, but I don't know. I just think I mean, Erik, you have the full description of what is going to be eligible.
This will answer some of your questions right now. Because the requirements were movies had to gross more than $150 million with at least 100 million in the US.
Okay.
Or equivalent streaming numbers, which is certainly one of those very muddy areas.
Well, no streamer got nominated here, actually.
They didn't, because they don't have quantifiable analytics to really prove it other than internal. So it's just one of those weird, funny things.
Yeah. And a lot of the movies too, probably that would have been eligible hadn't, if like they were awards players, had been on there long enough on their platforms to make such case. Maybe,
yes, possibly, because the specific rules state films that are released after November 22nd up to the end of the year may qualify based on projected box office performance and or digital streaming views from trusted industry sources.
But none of those were on this list.
No, but like Ferrari was on the list of the 18 eligible films.
That's
come out yet.
Interesting.
That's really interesting. That movie
yes, it is.
That movie's not making a dime,
No, it's not. But that's what I'm saying. So I mean, for all of the wonderful progress that the Globes can make, this whole thing is just such a weird thing.
Yeah,
because they're already populous. The Globes are already the most populous awards show that there is,
other than the People's Choice Awards, because the people vote.
But the two films that really exemplify what this category's requirements and ultimately the win is are already nominated in drama and comedy, musical, and across the board. Yeah. Like, it's so stupid to have this category because
category exists because of Barbie and Oppenheimer. This category it doesn't really matter anyone else that's in it, because it only exists to sort of prop up the return to box office, which I feel like we're going to get. We have gotten those like every 6 months since theaters really reopened, and it was like people are returning to theaters, and it like every 6 months like a movie does well, and it's the same.
It's the savior
over and over again.
Well, I think if you look at the 2024 slate, it might be a little bit bleaker than that, but that's
that's what comes from
the strike. I agree.
That's what comes from refusing to pay people a living wage. You lose money.
I agree, Dan. I agree.
That's what just happened.
I'm just the messenger.
The fact that this category exists at all at any award ceremony is ridiculous. Your box office money is the award. Like, that is already the award, is the amount of money you took home. Yeah. There is no need for a separate award for cinematic box office achievement. The money is the reward. I don't understand why we need to have it, but since it's here, the nominees feel like just about the best set of nominees we could have had in this category.
Very much so. I do want to highlight, I think, a film that had a remarkable day, in my opinion, and then also had a really good day at CCA. But I think a movie like Past Lives really had a remarkable day. Those 5 nominations, including, the addition of that 6th spot could have easily, and Best Director could have easily gone to another man, and we could have just had Greta Gerwig and the 5 boys. But having Celine Song in Best Director, I thought was so great, and then also the screenplay. But then to have
Greta Lee
in there as well, I felt really good for that movie, because Erik and I, we've talked about that movie's chances all year, and really how it's kind of gone up and down, right? Because we saw Zone struggle a little bit, and then Zone had a really big week, and because Anatomy of a Fall done really well. But obviously that could teeter because it's not eligible because of Taste of Things. But it Past Lives, which is that I keep going back to, is that movie that everybody loved for 6 months out of this year before everything else started coming out. Yeah. It's nominated. It needed to start showing up at some of these places, and I thought it really had a great day. Erik, what were some of the films that you thought had a really good day? And then we'll talk about the positives first before we start maybe talk about some of these maybe negative things that we see here.
Well, I mean, yes, obviously Past Lives did really well here. The director nomination, the screenplay nomination are fantastic. I'm not going to chalk it up to being 6 spots instead of 5. I think it could have gone a lot of ways.
No, that's what I think.
But I think it's great. And it did need to sort of have this resurgence and an influx of new blood being talked about the movie, because it is 6 months old, and things get really narrow once we start getting it to nominations and critics awards, and we really start seeing the same things over and over again. And I was really glad to see it return. I was really happy to see everything that May December got. For all of the knuckleheads that complained about it being in comedy, sorry for your loss, because it's May December's game, and it deserved everything that it got here. So I think it doing that well was good. Obviously Barbie, Oppenheimer, poor things, were going to do exactly
killers
expected, and killers. So not a lot there. I'm actually kind of glad that there were 6 spots all over the place, because those 4 films were already going to dominate so many categories that it wasn't going to make a lot of room for other names. I think the song category is wild and cool. The Bruce Springsteen song kind of coming in there
from that terrible movie.
I know, but it's like, guess what? I'm here too, not just Barbie, and that's it's fun. That's great. I love that.
No, I mean, like, and to just reiterate, going back to the point, I don't think that Celine's song got in just because they put in 6. But what I'm saying is that they are notorious for going out of their way of not nominating women for years and years and years and years and years through history.
The opposite.
No,
right. Currently, yeah.
I mean, currently
they were the first to actually award a woman. They are the opposite of the.
But what happened? What happened? Like, what was it, last year?
It doesn't.
Or the year, or years before. That's like fine, they are notorious for that.
There are years that
they are much better than the Oscars.
Yes, but overall, also I don't trust Hollywood enough to be like, you know what? We'll add another slot. Let's consider a female director rather than another male director.
Don't say that historically they're like this when they're not.
Well,
historically they're much better than the Oscars.
Yeah.
Well, what was interesting about that category here, the best director, is that Celine's song was the international nominee.
It wasn't Justin Triet.
Like, it wasn't Justin Triet. It wasn't Jonathan Glazer. It was Celine's song.
Which is very interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I also think it's like kind of interesting that that movie got into international, considering the like controversy around how much English was in Anatomy of a Fall earlier this year.
Isn't it very much like when The Farewell got into the category as well too, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, well, The Farewell and Minari.
So they've
Minari,
we didn't see it coming, but we should have probably.
I did, and I kept like putting it in and pulling it out. I'm like, this is a very Globes thing to do. They're gonna they're gonna do it.
Yeah, and I think that like I don't want to like downplay how well Past Lives did here, because it basically got in everywhere it needed to.
Could have got more,
like,
though. Yeah.
It could have gotten more, but the thing is that like when you sit back and think about what that movie is about and how it's about it, that is maybe the most Golden Globe friendly movie to have released this year. I mean, it is about being on foreign soil. It is about being an immigrant. It is about the experience of transversing between cultures and things like that, which are things that people in this voting body have to deal with.
I think that's definitely a good point, and it really is a wild to see that it did so much better at the Globes than Critics' Choice.
Yeah.
Especially considering how well that movie has done critically when it was released. But, you know,
A24 didn't fly anybody out that week.
Look,
you know?
I was going to say the story, the real story of the Golden Globes and the Critics' Choice nomination is the resurgence of Saltburn and Barry Keoghan. He is here. He's taken it. He is dancing around these awards shows in his skivvies.
Or nothing at all.
Yes. And I think everyone on this podcast is very much here for that.
Yes, but he had a good week, but clearly the other 5 in the category are more likely to get the Oscar nomination. I mean, that was
I don't know what you're talking about. Clearly he's going to off them at some point.
He's got a plan, all right. He's gonna start with the most vulnerable one. I don't know. Leo's easily to manipulate, I guess, as in Killers. I was very happy to see Andrew Scott get in for All of Us Strangers, obviously, because that movie has just felt like with Critics' Choice, it only got the screenplay nomination. It's it only got Andrew Scott. The movie is not being, widely taken, so getting a ton of nominations from everyone in that cast, and then that screenplay, the direction, everything. So that is the film that will probably, sadly, most likely start losing steam very, very soon, especially since Poor Things is doing so well for Searchlight that they're most likely transition big time for that film, and have some pretty. It's going to be a very, very Barbie versus Poor Things comedy musical category, and then I mean, you look at the way that the international features dominated, even though, yes, Killers and Oppenheimer are such big films to go up against, the way that those international films dominated in those categories, you cannot factor those out. Maestro had a big day as well, too, with Cooper getting into getting into director, and then, of course, both the stars getting into picture as well. But, I mean, The Boy and the Heron getting the score nomination, I thought was such an inspired and wonderful nomination.
That's so cool.
Yes,
I'm curious about the Zone of Interest getting all these Best Original Score mentions.
That's such because it's such a great score.
But it is a great score, but it is used so sparingly in that film.
Yeah,
and then there was that weird win where they also cited the sound work.
Well, that's why
for the score win. Like, it seems like a very strange way to reward that film for its sound without actually giving it a nomination for best sound. And I don't like that. As much as I like that I think both the sound work and that score, but
I think who you're talking about doesn't do a sound award, so it was a way to double up on that. As
where was this at?
I'm trying to remember. I don't remember now.
Was it LAFCA? I think it was LAFCA.
Maybe.
Yeah, because they don't have a sound.
They don't have a sound category,
but
so
then have a special then put in a special achievement award if you really want to honor it for that, and you should. Like, the sound work in Zone of Interest is the best of the decade, maybe. Like, it's so good, but then award that.
Yeah.
Don't award that work by awarding the score. They're very different elements.
Well, I also think too.
I'm definitely pro the score getting attention, though.
Yes, as well as
because they are almost one and the same.
Yes, I thought that obviously Anatomy of Fall getting screenplay. I really did wish that Sammy Birch got into the screenplay category. That screenplay is incredible. Kaylee Spaney. We talked about her on Actress Breakdown, I believe last week, you and me, Dan, but Eric and I have talked about Kaylee Spaney and that Volpe Cup staying alive in this race for a little bit longer, right, Eric? Even though obviously the momentum, the split category, but then also to having the maybe even also the additional spot in there as well, because if you just look at the way that the other films against her performed, she's her solo nominee as well. But
the other thing in screenplay, all of Us Strangers made me very, very sad here.
Yes.
I mean, I can see the tea leaves. I know where things are going.
I don't like it, Eric.
It's all pointed at Eric.
I will still do everything I possibly can for it, but I can't I'm not a crazy person.
To be honest, I was surprised because sometimes the Globes in the screenplay category, they always give us like a curveball. And I felt like for some weird reason, I kept feeling that Maestro might have been another one of the screenplay nominations that got in. And I believe that A Star Is Born, if I'm not mistaken, got that screenplay nomination. I could be wrong about that, but it feels like it did. But there wasn't really any surprises in that. It was at the Oscars. I didn't know if they broke the 5 at the time during that year in 2019 when the ceremony was. But I mean, obviously, Rosamund Pike, you talked about Saltburn earlier, getting in.
Love that nomination.
She's so good. I loved that nomination so much.
What we did see, though, is when it came to the 6th spot in the supporting actor race, it was the extra spot, it seems like, was the two Poor Things boys, both Willem Dafoe and Mark Ruffalo got in. Charles Milton, Gosling, Downey Jr., and Robert De Niro. Those really are the 6 sort of starting to become solidifiers in a lot of critics nominations, as well as also, copy and paste from any critics group, and that's what you got for CCA. But those seem to be like the 6 vying for the 5 spots there, right, Eric? I mean, it seems like we're getting to that point.
It's the only difference between CCA and the Globes in this category was the Globes went for Willem Dafoe and Critics' Choice went for Sterling K. Brown.
Yes.
So I think that's an interesting thing. Brown hasn't really gotten much momentum. Neither is Dafoe. So it's it could just be that neither of them do, because the other 5 feel pretty solid.
Or I don't
know if SAG is gonna give us the answers that we need. If the SAG 5 is those 5, then I think
Well, yeah, even going back to what Dan was saying last week, and Dan, I've been really thinking about a lot what you said last week of like, if the Oscars start going really for Oppenheimer too, there is the Matt Damon sort of lingering out there in the water. Maybe there's a SAG nomination in as well.
He has managed to some mentions for Air, including at the Golden Globes. It's keeping his name out there. It's just that people still like him.
Yeah, and Q&As and everything. They could potentially. I think, like, honestly, Warner Brothers Universal really should be having a big campaign event where they try to get the entire cast of those movies together out there on a stage. Like, that just seems like the ultimate PR move at a certain point, in a mega screening in LA, but for voting members. But yeah, I think that's one to consider. And there's Sterling K. Brown. That was that was interesting because of American Fiction's popularity. Also, again, Amazon did very well at the Critics' Choice Awards. They are
good for them.
I hear they put on a great party, and the members love it. So there you go. But anything else really that stuck out for you in terms of Globes before we just move over to Critics' Choice real quick, and then we can talk about them sort of all together at that point?
It's when we talk about the Globes, we obviously talk about the split acting categories and split top categories where, at the Oscars, we don't have that. So we've got 12 people nominated in each acting category. They're going to be vying for 5 spots at the Oscars. So things start to really move outside of the Globe direction once we get SAG and BAFTA to have a little bit of say.
Well, the big thing about the Golden Globes was the nominations for Fantasia and Daniel Brooks, but the
not for The Color Purple in
film, and not going for
in
that.
Fact, no musicals nominated for Best Motion Picture Musical or Comedy. No, that's not true.
Well, Barbie
is a musical, basically. It's a covert musical, let's be honest.
One big musical number.
Well, it's got the
two.
All right, 2-ish.
Like
2.
3.
There are 2
2.5
actual musical numbers. Then there is a very heavy musical chase sequence that is like almost a dance number. Then there is the two trips back and forth between Barbie and the real world, which are basically musical numbers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean
Kind
that's
of.
5 songs. That's more than some.
Yeah.
Emma
film
Stone
musicals.
dances in Poor Things,
Yeah,
right?
but it doesn't
Yeah.
make it a musical.
I'm just kidding.
No, that is probably, we haven't even really talked about it appropriately. This should be really like the biggest thing to
From the
come out
Globes,
of the
yeah.
Globes is that we had 3 major movie musicals and none of them got into this category. I think what it did is sort of make people, and they do this every year anyway, of like, why is it comedy musical? It's like, because it comes from the 40s and 50s and 60s. That's why.
Yeah. No
But-
Wonka.
Yeah.
Yeah, this year really kind of highlighted maybe the weirdness of musicals being in comedy, and that maybe in the future you should be able to just submit them in ether.
Well, I think also there was the article that came out yesterday that I read about how movies are marketing and studios are marketing musicals and how they're erasing music. I mean, Eric, this was the big point of contention
so
that you had
weird.
about the Wonka trailers, about that they're hiding musical, numbers, or like when The Color Purple even. It felt like at times in some of those trailers that they're hiding bigger numbers or the big moments and stuff. And
It's so strange because they are quote unquote hiding the fact that it's a musical, but also if you look at those trailers, there are lots of shots in them that are obviously from big production numbers. Even Mean Girls, which like got that trailer got the most flack for like hiding the fact that it's a musical. Like there are more than half of that trailer are shots from obviously musical numbers. It's just not showing the actual music.
yes.
Which is just so strange because if you're making a musical, you would, in theory, want to sell the music, which is the biggest element of a musical.
Yeah.
And that, like the built-in audience wants to hear the music. So why wouldn't you put that out there? It's very strange decision to me, but I think that Color Purple missing Best Picture here is very weird, given that it got the nominations for actress and supporting actress. That I mean, Fantasia getting in, I don't think was a given at all in that category. Although
Really?
I think
I thought
Danielle
that was
Brooks
easy.
was, but it's one of those things where like, is that just because that is a film that caters towards more American interests than foreign tastes, and that's why it missed that nomination? Or is it actually a sign of weakness for that movie in Best Picture?
It is, I think.
It's a sign of, I mean, again, any of these, and I think you can kind of just, at least this year and maybe the next couple of years, just point to the tripling of membership size.
Yeah.
Where there is just less consensus and agreement, because these are really different people from all over the place now.
Yeah.
And to your point, Dan, I don't know if it's necessarily because it's too American, because there's certainly plenty of American films here.
Well,
but
or not even just American, but like more, I guess, more. This is also the wrong word, but like mainstream or like a broad commercial play. Like the Oscars or CCAs would never go for Alma Poisty and Fallen Leaves, but to a more foreign Eurocentric art appreciative body like this, of course.
But I wonder. I'm sorry, Eric. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I mean, I think visibility has a certain factor in this. Like, where's Iron Claw anywhere? Because nobody saw it. That's why it's like nowhere.
Yeah.
And I think The Color Purple, even with the nominations that it got, which almost feel like penciled in.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, that's what it feels like. It feels like, well, we haven't seen the film, but we've heard that these are
a little bit of that. it feels a little bit
Well, I
like
saw
that.
the Q&As online with Fantasia and
That feels like
Danielle.
an old school Globe voter.
Yeah, that's a big
move.
old school Globes move. Yeah.
But they're because it went to 300 that the new ones were like, we're good.
Yeah. Or they didn't see, or the other thing is I mean, at the time of recording, the review embargo is still not even up. And so, yeah, it would be nice to, I don't know, have reviews about it, read about it, see what the buzz is. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the other
I
films
mean,
that are
but you
out
know,
there.
it didn't get into CCA Best Picture, so
Yeah, but also CCA sent out screener links and screenings in November. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Those are US based. They
Yeah.
went to all voters. And again, these new Globe voters mostly do not live in the United States. So their option for screening things was not the same as others.
Yeah, it's very, yeah. I mean, it is,
visibility had to be a bit
it's a
of
territory thing for sure, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also too, it just might come down to they might have liked those other films more as well. And
Go
which, I
figure.
mean,
What an idea. What a concept.
I mean, which is crazy, I know, but also like it's such a strong year for films. I mean, there's tons of films that that we would love to see get in. I mean, like again, like I'd love to see All of Us Strangers in there. You know what I mean? And that's a movie that only got the one nomination. You know, and I know I just want to say it again to make Erik mad. But moving on,
but it makes me sad.
it does make me sad because because almost it starts feeling like parody. We're running a little bit of a parody thing here because, you know, if you transition over to CCA, I mean, like the same films were at the top of the list in terms of the number of nominees. I mean, you had Barbie completely shatter the old record that I believe was set last year, if I'm not mistaken, by Everything Everywhere All at Once. And now it is at 18. I mean, it helps to have like 9 songs nominated in original song. But that being said, 18 nominations for Barbie, 13 apiece for Oppenheimer and Poor Things, 12 for Killers of the Flower Moon. Those are the top 4 at the Globes as well. Holdovers and Maestro with 8, Color Purple and American Fiction with 5. And then a mixture of Air, Anatomy of a Fall, May, December, Past Lives, and Saltburn. Oh, and Across the Spider-Verse at 3. So it was but I will go back to the best picture here. The best picture here at Critics' Choice was American Fiction, Barbie, The Color Purple, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, Poor Things, and then Saltburn, which is
I love that Saltburn nomination, but let's be real.
Let's be honest.
Let's be real.
Between
that and like I know it, like we said, reviews are not yet, so we don't know. But the fact that like Saltburn and The Color Purple made it into this category over All of Us Strangers, which has a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes, is a little bit suspect.
Yeah, I mean, but this sort of happened with After Sun last year, where it was the highest rated movie critically, but then when you got to Critics' Choice and larger groups rather than
they said who's she,
it was a little less representative. But I mean, After Sun did extremely well with, you know, individual critics group and all that in a way that Strangers is not doing either.
Yeah.
So
But Amazon had an enormous day. I mean, getting both American Fiction and Saltburn in there. I mean, getting the acting ensemble for Air, which is a film that wasn't in the picture conversation, which is again another sneaky thing that could happen at SAG. It's got a big, and they were doing screenings that weekend with Viola Davis and Ben Affleck and crew there. You know, obviously I mean, there was a big Amazon event right at the time of voting here. I'm not saying that correlates with anything, but maybe it did. You know, because who doesn't love a party? But you know, Netflix only getting Maestro
Well,
and
but
it's
it's not
interesting
about the
because
party. It really is about the visibility, like Eric was saying
no,
earlier.
but it's
You
about
have
getting
these,
it to your
you have
voters. Yeah.
exactly, you have these events and you bring people out so that they can see the movie and talk to the people, and that's really what gets people to vote for things.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Is
they a lasting memory in your mind.
yeah,
Like, because if a studio just flies you out and sees the film, does a press conference, and then you don't get to talk to anybody, it's different than having a party where you can,
talk to
actually
people.
meet the talent and
Yeah.
have a moment and experience. And it doesn't maybe it's not going to hinder the film at all, but it's also going to make you remember, I love that movie and I also had this great experience with it. And also you have to remember, and Eric, this is your first year in CCA, and so the voting system's a little bit different than like a lot of other places where you have only 3 spots to put in for all your other categories and 5 spots to put in for your best picture. So you don't have a 10 really to put in there. So if you are having something on that's really fun and exciting, that's fresh on the mind, that's most likely going to get in there than, again, like an event that is lackluster as opposed to a big one. And those films
Well,
are well respected. Like Saltburn has a major following and fan base.
I voted for it, so I take
There you go.
But
And
then again, how
American
much do they?
Fiction.
Because like you would think that with only 3 or 5 slots, that would lead to a lot of the same films over and over. In
Well,
these
it did.
categories. It did, but Saltburn didn't get in for screenplay
No,
or director or other things that you would think
but
that
they
if
have less spots.
they really like this movie,
Yeah.
like if people really loved this movie enough for it to get it to Best Picture, you would think that those people would also support it in other major categories, but they didn't.
I mean, I don't think it's much that. I think the picture nomination makes total sense because it has 5 spots. So, and those spots are ranked or whatever, but if you throw enough 3s, 4s, and 5s in there of Saltburn, and it goes in with some 1s, then you can get it into 10 as opposed to like some people might not connect with All of Us Strangers, or some people are put off by May, December and not even put it on their ballot at all, but certain yeah, exactly. But then also but that doesn't mean that those performances, right? Because I do like my ballot. It wasn't all the same thing, and I did performances that I knew, Dan, weren't going to get. That needed probably more of a push. Just to kind of inside baseball there. Like I didn't put a bunch of the household names in there because I knew that they would get all those followings. I put ones that I was like, well, these are still some of my favorite performances of the year, and I want them to get this spot. And these, especially these first place votes, to really.
Wouldn't it be nice if any of those had gotten nominations?
I think like 2 of them did. Like 2 of my 12 got in, and but it's also, it is the problem, like Eric, you mentioned, of having a large and growing body. I mean, like, they let Eric in this year. Like, it really has gone downhill. They
this group apparently
all these controversies about these nominees. They let Eric in this year. They weren't having these last year. I'm just pointing them out, just saying. But I think overall we've seen that the real thing that I got from this week was the power of Barbie. That's 18 and 9 nominations is a huge haul for it. Anyone that's doubting it at this point is probably just being really stubborn. And
doubting it in what terms?
Well, there are people online that still doubt, like, it's to get into big spots, and I think it's because of of
the perceived slightness
of it, that it being the big box office film, seeing this pattern before. Also, yes, being directed by a woman, but also being a flat out comedy. That like that's the thing that I've always, in terms of wins or just overall, like I'm like, we rarely see a big giant studio comedy get rewarded like this in such a way, and it's great to see.
We also don't see many big massive studio comedies with this level of creative verve.
No,
like
no, for sure. But I mean, it's also going up against things that are much more in their wheelhouse, like Killers of the Flower Moon and Oppenheimer, and holding their own. So I think that when we talked about it a couple weeks ago, Eric, these are our 3 kind of big front runners and will be that, it seems like, for the foreseeable future of the season. It is a killer's Oppenheimer Barbie world, and we are just going to have to see how the chips fly, because all these voting bodies could vote differently. Like Globes, obviously it'll be split. Once we get to the guilds, it'll be different. But I mean, Erik, based off of sort of looking at the critics' wins already, but looking at these nominations too, have things sort of started changing for you, or has it kind of stayed the same? Are you still waiting for like SAG and Producers Guild and the guilds to respond? Like, where are where are you usually at with this?
Guilds haven't even started yet, but
Yeah.
so things are actually playing out exactly as
We predicted it.
anybody could have seen from the summertime.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think anything's really changed that much in this week. And I think the only thing that's changed, maybe is a change, is that somebody like Charles Melton is a real contender,
Yes.
not a weird outlier that sort of just happened. No, he's real. He might be like the Cody Smith McPhee of this year to somebody else, but he's a real nominee that's going to happen.
He's a real boy.
You know, and so I think maybe there was a little bit of that. Obviously, the resurgence of Past Lives, and a couple of interesting weird things. Julianne Moore and Jodie Foster both getting into Globes and Critics' Choice.
Yes, major.
Is interesting, especially because I think there's a world where they are able to get in at the end, but their leads absolutely won't.
Yeah.
That's something that kind of might be taking some shape, is being able to see past maybe where we thought things were a month ago.
Yeah. I mean, the CCA 6 and lead actor are exactly the 6 that we are currently looking at, and Dan and I talked about last week.
Yeah.
Greta Lee getting both CCA and Golden Globe was really good, but also I mean, it was Gladstone, Hooler, Mulligan, Stone, and Robbie, which feel like the 5, but then also you got to remember Annette Bening and Natalie Portman as well. Again, it didn't really clarify or clear out, but it definitely started looking at it, because the thing happens, this happens all the time too. We sit at this point and we're like, well, how much do Globes and Critics' Choice matter? But as you start seeing the same things over and over again, I know this just because people are inherently lazy. They just start seeing the same things, or the same performances start showing up, and then a consensus is sort of made. And I think that was a little bit of the frustrating part with CCA after seeing the Globes, is the Globes taking, going very international, or not being afraid to have animated in other categories, or being able to have some surprising things. And it was like looking at prediction pages on like Major Trades or on our site. You know what I mean? It didn't actually represent, like Dan, to your point, like critics,
the
opinions.
Actual Critics' Choice.
Yeah, like when you look at like the critics wins that we've had so far, like it's you sit there and you're like, well, where are the surprises? Because there weren't a lot of surprises. You know what I mean?
And not to shade, the films that they nominated for Best Picture are all good movies, but the fact that neither Anatomy of a Fall nor Zone of Interest were nominated for Best Picture at the Critics' Choice Awards, that's when you start questioning what the words critics and choice mean.
I'll take one a step further, Dan. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. That one seems to be the one that is championed a lot by critics. There's a ton of CCA voters that go out there and talk about animation. And that movie missing Best Picture, which was one of the best reviewed films of the year, if not the right there with The Boy and the Heron as the best reviewed animated feature of the year. Total box office success. A movie that like feels like it needs to be championed, and just had a giant events too, where like Pimpleton played the score with the film, and it was a big event that happened in LA. last week or the week before as well too.
Yeah.
So that movie's been out there, and it just really kind of, I scratched my head because I expected that to get in for a movie that, when you really think about it, you have to think about it as like the Oscars are. Like, that is a safer, honestly, more of a predictable, I guess, film to get in, and one to be championed more than something like a Saltburn. Because like there was a lot of divisiveness about that, by audiences, but then also by a lot of people online, and those included members that, I mean, that movie is not going to be for everyone, and so that's a nice thing that Saltburn gets in there, but but obviously there's, I think, other reasons why it gets in there as well too. So it's this weird dance that they have. I mean, I do love that they have the young actor and actress category at CCA. I think that's really great, because but then also it relegates all these performances over there rather than nominating them. It seems like somebody like Dominic Sessa in like a supporting actor category, and they have like an age cutoff of, like, I think it's 21 years old or any younger as well too. So it's a little bit tricky when it comes to that. But I mean, yeah, I was happy to see, like, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, in an adapted screenplay category, and alongside all of the strangers,
But again, you have that, but then like after her,
Where's Rachel McAdams?
Stronger critics won than many people would have expected. Where is Rachel McAdams? But the person who did get into supporting actress, America Ferrera for Barbie, which gives some ammunition to people who have been saying that she's going to get an Oscar nomination this year. I don't know that I still don't think I agree with those people that that's happening, but they can now point to the CCA nomination and say she's gotten in before.
No, for sure. So, all right. Anything else you guys want to mention about these lovely topics? Do you guys have early predictions as to what CCA and Globes are going to take in Best Picture? Erik? Long pause. Great for an audio medium.
I mean, I think in Globes, Oppenheimer will win the drama Best Picture. I think it is very contentious between Poor Things and Barbie for picture and actress. I'm really kind of excited to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Because both make a lot of sense.
They really do.
Much sense.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
CCA?
Critics' Choice, I think
it's Barbie all the way at CCA.
I think maybe they will. I think maybe they will get on the Barbie train in a very real way.
I think that if Barbie wins at Globes, there could be like a vote to swing it somewhere else, because they're very reactionary, because their voting system, at least for the most part in the past, has been right after, like, it concludes right after the Globes. So, because then, like, there was like the one year where Once Upon a Time in Hollywood won their best film right after it won the Globes as well. So, over Parasite in 1917. So it was like, what are we doing here? And trying to predict the Oscar. Yeah, I feel like it. But the voting system might have changed, and it might have in the cutoffs might be different before the Globes. I don't know the deadlines off the top of my head as of right now. But
yeah, there's everything's happening in that week.
It really is it's really tight. Yeah.
7th, and the Critics' Choice is the 14th. Oscar nomination voting begins right in the middle of that.
Mm-hmm.
So does DGA winner voting and PGA nomination voting. So it's a huge week of visibility. So these two groups are going to want to make their mark with their winner choices.
Yeah. Dan, where do you have any early picture predictions for these right now?
Yeah, I do think Globes will definitely go for Oppenheimer, and I don't think they'll do the Barbenheimer double feature. I think they may go a little more Euro artsy and go for Poor Things in the comedy category. But CCA.
Uh-oh. What do you got, Dan?
Right now, and pardon the phrase, given what a lot of what we've been talking about, but I'm feeling a little salty. And I think that Critics' Choice may go for Killers of the Flower Moon instead.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Marty Scorsese has pull.
I
People
think
like him a lot.
I think the Globes are going to go for Killers of the Flower Moon, and I think that the cinematic achievement's going to go to Barbie, and I think they're going to win. I think they like Greta Gerwig and they like Lanthimos, but I think they're going to go with Barbie in best musical or comedy. But I think Emma Stone's going to win actress, so I think that there's going to be a split. And then I think CCA is going to go for Oppenheimer. Those 4K Blu-rays are going to go a long way.
Right.
In the vote. You know what I'm saying? Because you can't get them anywhere on the planet right now. They're sold out, baby. You know what I mean? No, I just think that seems like a very Critics' Choice. Knowing a lot of those members, that seems like a very Critics' Choice move. Like, and I do think Globes. I think that Killers makes a little bit more sense there for me, because there are some critics that are like not as high on Killers as like myself or others, and probably won't vote for it. And I think that Barbie winning at Globes, it would make sense. No, though the Barbie win or a Barbie loss could push it over that edge, because like I think that if like Oppenheimer loses, that could help it in its CCA voting. But I think if Barbie loses and doesn't win, then I think in final voting for people, they could really try to push it. And so I think that it kind of they'll play off of each other, but will they matter in the long run? Well, it remains to be seen.
You guys, I just realized this. What is stopping the Critics' Choice voting body from giving Best Picture to Barbenheimer? So just saying it's a tie. Barbie and Oppenheimer have both
They've done
won
it before.
Best
The whole Bong Joon-ho.
I'm just
Sam
saying,
Mendes.
and especially if what happens, if Golden Globes goes for Killers and Poor Things,
Yeah, that's a very
which could happen.
Yeah, Dan, I'm going to actually give you kudos to that, because that's exactly the sweaty moment that we would all kind of anticipate from CCA.
It is so that to me is like the Glenn Close Lady Gaga tie.
Yeah,
it's exactly that. It's
very
both of we love both of these things, then they could both win Oscars. So let's just give it to both of them.
I mean, it so feels like that, because like it just feels like somebody is going to do it. Some critics group or some television show is going to just say the winner is both Barbie and Oppenheimer. They are not going to be able to resist having that moment. Like it just.
I really hope that they can, because it's just going to look like what it's going to look like.
It's gonna but we just know how they are, Eric, and how they.
But like the thing is,
I hope they don't do it. Like,
but if here's the thing, like if that did happen at CCAs, yes, it would have been obviously sweaty and begging for views and clicks and love and Oscar predictions, but it also feels like weirdly possible. Like that would feel like genuine to me. Like people do love both of those movies.
Yeah,
and them splitting would feel like that feels indicative of this year, because those two movies have dominated so much. And since we're not going to give it to the actual best reviewed film of the year because this is Critics' Choice, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, they are the most talked about, beloved, box office driven, however metric you want to put it out there. They're the thing that, I mean, they are together bigger than something even like Top Gun. They're the great thing about cinema is choice. Having two film, like Eric, you've always said this about these two movies, is having that choice as an audience to be able to go see this pink colored musical comedy or going to see this 3-hour existential drama. You know what I mean? Like, you have the choice, and audiences said, "I'll take both, please," multiple times, and
That's
it's
how it always used to be. We
how it
always
used to be. It's a throwback.
have tremendous counter programming and, like, 4 huge movies opening on the same day, and everyone could do well because
Yeah.
people went to movies.
Yeah. So we'll see how it plays out. We'll talk about the Globes here and the Critics' Choice winners here in the next couple weeks. But now we're going to transition over. We're going to talk about some movies that have been nominated. One movie in particular that didn't get any nominations over the last week, it felt like, which was The Iron Claw, which is Sean Durkin's latest film, starring Zac Efron and Jeremy Allen White, about the Von Erich wrestling family and the tragedy that faced them. Eric's also number one movie of the year, based off of that phase. He just loves this movie. He talked about it to me for hours the other day on the phone. Eric,
About how much he hates it.
Yeah,
I don't
like,
hate it at all. It's just
tell me what you think about it.
I didn't feel like I really learned much about this family and brothers. I didn't feel like I learned much about wrestling or any like really interesting behind the scenes moments about what's real and what's not and why. And I think that could have been pretty interesting. I went in knowing really nothing at all. I watched wrestling when I was a kid, but I was completely unfamiliar with the Von Erich family. Totally, which is kind of a good thing. And I chose not to also like look into things. I did a little bit after, like, the whole missing brother and like, what's that about? But it just felt like a punishment. The trauma and the tragedy was so swift, and even though it wasn't graphic in any way, it kind of like all happened in a really short period of time, whether real life or for narrative purposes. So it all just kind of happens, and that's sort of what it felt like. I didn't feel like I was getting just much from it. And even the father, Holt McKinley, who I loved,
He was great.
he was not like that bad of a bad guy.
Oh my God. Here we go.
He really wasn't. I mean, in terms of
I understand what he's talking about.
In terms,
That's right.
no, but in terms of like in terms of what we see from like these kind of like fathers and characters, I was like, oh, okay. I thought he was gonna be a whole lot worse, because he wasn't. He was he was really just like a bad stage mom. I don't know.
I think that he is playing a specific type of father that I think I see a lot down here in Texas, where it's that the words and what he's saying, and
sure,
if you disappoint me,
there's
it'll
nothing
be
interesting about that unless you do something interesting with it, because it's such a boilerplate character, and
I think
he's so underwritten. The only great part is at the breakfast table when he's like saying,
you're Kevin's my favorite, like this person's my favorite,
and
you got a chance to move up.
That was good.
That was great. That was like,
and then you saw it happen throughout the movie that people did move up and down that, but it wasn't necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, mostly
it wasn't really based on anything that they could
Zac
do.
Efron, he could only move up because everyone dies.
Well, I mean,
even then he didn't move up. He was still his least favorite.
Yeah,
he
doesn't.
Just sad the whole time. He was just.
I mean, it is
barrel-chested and sad.
Dan, what do you think of the film before I get into it?
I don't disagree with a lot of what Eric said, but I think the reason for the sort of lack of specificity is that it's not really about the Von Erich family. I mean, it is, but it's only about them as this avatar of American exceptionalism and how that is a trap, and how this, be the best at all costs, always got to be winners, always got to come out on top. No matter how much you say those things, you cannot always win.
Yeah.
Mhm.
fate and other things in life will take that away from you 9 times out of 10.
For sure.
And I think that it's a very pointed piece of filmmaking to people who want to see a movie about the Von Erich family, to say sort of holding them up and saying, this is what you hold up as something worthy of praise. These idiot assholes. Like, the one person who really survives and does something good with his life does so because he understands his own limitations, or at least comes to understand his own limitations, and
Mhm.
he listens to other people, and he leads with his heart. Like, that's really, like, Zac Efron's character, that guy, that's his thing. Like, I love my family. I just want to be with my family all the time. And the
Yeah.
family is pushing this individualism, which is so American, and it gets destroyed.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly pointed. That said, I think that it's a problem because I don't feel like we really got to know a lot of these characters before they suffer this precipitous fall.
Yep.
So I kind of felt, once the tragedy starts happening, I kind of felt a little at a remove from it, and instead of being emotionally involved, I was more intellectually involved in the story. And I think that it's a story that absolutely calls for emotional investment and involvement. And I didn't feel that.
I get you. I mean, I'm a little bit closer to the story. I grew up with knowing of the Von Erichs for a long, long time, from my dad being a big fan of this era of wrestling, and this is a giant story within wrestling, because it is such a deeply heartbreaking tragedy. And what happens in the film is absolutely true. And to Eric's point, there is even a creative decision by Sean Durkin, while also getting the blessing of Kevin Von Erich, to eliminate one of the deaths of his brothers that happened in real life. That was essentially, they took the Jeremy Allen White character, and they took two brothers storyline and kind of converged them, because they meet the same ultimate sad demise of suicide. And I think that Sean Durkin is one of the best upcoming directors that we have. I think Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, and The Nest are incredible.
Wait. When do we stop calling someone an up and coming director?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to
third
call Sean
movie.
Durkin up and coming.
Yeah,
I mean, like, he's not around like all the time. I guess you can say one of the best directors of his generation.
4M is like 10 years old.
Okay, fine. 4M. All right.
I'm not going to say that.
Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. It's got a title, if I can say it. It's probably because you can't remember the title because you're so old. Anyway, I think that this is the lesser of his films. I think that Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, and The Nest, or TN, as Eric likes to call it, is those are better features overall. But I think that there are things in this movie that I really do appreciate. A lot of what you were talking about, Dan, in terms of the idea of sort of the American dream, but then also obsession, the idea of their father having this giant obsession and putting that upon his children, and that ultimately leading to the demise of this entire family.
It is a Greek tragedy. Like, it is very Greek tragedy.
Right on.
The only thing that's missing is an Oedipal complex.
I mean, pretty much. But I mean, and then also like Maura Tierney's like stoic, like I don't give a shit kind of mother, she's fantastic in the film. Like one scene,
I was not expecting this movie to give her so much screen time. It did not
need to
give her so much screen time. I was very glad it did.
Yes, and I think that she's great. I think like Hollywood still has like maybe like a Lily James problem, where like I think that the film doesn't do her any justice, and it's
It reminded me so much of her role in Baby Driver.
Yeah, and it's like, what are you? Yeah, you're doing the same thing. It's like
it's also what I imagine Jodie Comer's role in The Bike Riders is. Even though I haven't seen it and won't.
Well, she doesn't have a bad accent in this.
Not coming out.
Attorney, that's for sure.
Yeah. I Comer's accent's horrible in The Bike Riders, and that's I'll give that to James at least here. And I think that for me, a lot of the first act of the film is setting up who these guys are. Their sort of family motto. Their lives were wrestling. Their lives were these goals. Their father's obsession turned into this family obsession, which then turned into a nightmare. And you see throughout it when they have other things that they're interested in. Maybe it's women, maybe it's being in a band, maybe it's school, maybe it's these other things. Those are all, or maybe it's going to the Olympics, or what all. Ultimately, the roads then lead back to the sportatorium. It leads back to the ring. It leads back to their father's obsession. And it's this constant thing of, it's like, you can go down all these avenues. You're going to end up back here with your brothers. And that is ultimately then their downfall, because the second act is all the tragedy that happens. And I think that that's when really it is a Sean Durkin movie, and it is dreadful and it is very sad, but also there's something about the way that Durkin is able to build tension as a director that I find to be absolutely fascinating, especially in his previous two films, but in this like sort of 45-minute sequence. I think the problem with the film is the last act of the film. It doesn't solidify itself by the end. Efron's performance is really good and it's very committed, but ultimately, yeah, it's very almost one note at times. I feel like the Jeremy Allen White character shows up about 45 minutes, into the film, and is really not given a lot to do. Harris Dickinson, I actually thought was really.
Oh, he's so far best in show. It's not even funny.
Yeah, he knocks it all apart.
Fantastic.
Yes, and Holm McCartney, I thought was really good, but I understand your criticisms, Eric, of it. I can get it.
He's played this kind of guy before. This isn't like really foreign to him. He can do extremely intimidating, gruff.
Yeah.
In his sleep,
in his sleep. But I think that there's
this is perfect casting. I love this. And
yeah.
What are you doing with this? Not much.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like an example of great casting that is just results in the exact performance you'd expect.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that, and I think also just to see him get sort of a bigger screen opportunity with a role like this, even though, yes, we've seen him mostly on television. I thought he actually really solidified and showed this man's obsession, and the opening shot of the film too, being in black and white and being essentially really almost like this movie is from his perspective a lot at times, along with Kevin, and it's sort of this father-son tragedy, because then they're all that's left of this dynasty by the end, and I wish there was more interaction with them or more follow-up instead of what we get at the end. And I think this movie doesn't know how to end. There's like 4 endings to this thing, and I think the ending that they chose is poor, and it's the problem that I have with a lot of directors that deal with child actors and don't know how to deliver good performances with them, or get good performances, or cast good performance to play this, because those kids
actors are terrible.
Yeah, I think they're terrible in this.
I
think that the dialogue written for them also is so hokey. And it felt like if you're going to have this emotional journey for Efron, that should have been just a quieter with the score kind of play as he sees his boys off in the distance kind of thing. And then the panning shot as opposed, and I'm not trying to tell Durkin how to make his movie, but it felt like what we got at the end doesn't tie into the sentimentality of that moment, doesn't tie into the tragedy that we've seen throughout the 2+ hours that we've had before. And so,
it's so funny because I actually liked the ending a lot. I agree that the kids are terrible and they should be like chucked in the bin, but I liked the end.
See, I liked
that ending much better than the other ending that involved
the dreams,
one of the Von Erich's brothers and a small child.
Oh yeah. That was horrible.
That was like, are you effing kidding me?
See, I actually preferred all that sort of
I did
Malik,
not like
Malik,
that.
the Malik level sort of.
That felt so out of tone with the rest of this film for me. It just felt completely out of place.
Yeah, I felt like that one for me was a little bit better because it was mostly the actors doing the talking rather than these children. But it's still like I felt like there was an ending before when Kevin has to make final decisions on the sportatorium and things of that nature, and the fallout of his brother. Even I thought like that could have been, and there's multiple places this movie ends, and I don't think that I think it could have cut down to maybe a 2-hour movie that would have really been tighter and packed more of a wallop than it does sort of a whimper by the end. You know, it's a real damn shame that this movie was released now, because it still feels like, and Erik and I were talking about this all season long, about this movie felt like the perfect movie to put at TIFF or Telluride or a film festival, to build buzz for it, to get an audience behind it. That cast, I mean, obviously they would have had the cast out there because they would have had the SAG agreements and everything with A24. Yeah. Oh no, they were at the premiere, because the night I was at the premiere in Dallas, that was the night that the strike news broke.
Well, they already had waivers,
so they had waivers. Yeah. So yeah, they would have been able to make it anyway. But like,
it feels like
they didn't do anything because everything was so late with it.
Yes.
Yeah, it feels like they should have gone the route that The Fighter went, which is like big, flashy AFI Fest premiere, like a couple weeks or a month before it opens. I think that would have.
I mean, I get the
just opening it in the middle of December.
I get the premiere though at Dallas and having it there, and that sentimentality. I get that, but I agree with you, Dan. Like maybe have that a little bit earlier, and then have the bigger one even. And you know, it they tried to make this seem like it's going to be a commercial play. If anybody watches this trailer and takes their family, they're going to be in for like the most depressing, outside of zone of interest, the most depressing theater going experience you can have.
It's okay to watch depressing movies with your family. Not everything.
Not with kids.
I mean, that's what Christmas is for.
Yeah,
Erik,
be
right?
disappointment.
That's what Christmas is for. Depression, being with your family.
we have a review up on the website. Our own Jay Ledbetter wrote the review. It's a good review. He really loved it. It's one of his favorite films of the year.
It's great, and this is my thoughts about it don't take away anybody's like I know Jay has like a close connection to it. I know you do as well. I know other people that saw it that love it absolutely do as well, and I can't dismiss that and then say, I liked All of Us Strangers because I had a personal connection, and just because you don't doesn't mean
I get it.
Wrong for it.
Some movies hit us differently.
Terribly unfair.
It's a movie that I still really like, and I really do like Durkin as a director, but there are just things that I would have liked to be a little bit tighter, like his other films.
Instead of fewer films.
What? I'm sorry?
Maybe he needs to make more films instead of fewer and far between.
Well, he's had like a bunch of projects that have gotten like yanked at the last second. I think he's talked about like he was going to do like a Prairie Home Companion film, which also feels like that. Sean Durkin doing a Prairie Home Companion. What is that like? Everybody's going to die on the prairie. Like it just would have been like really weird. We're a little weird, but but this this is the most commercial populist thing he's done, and
yeah, but just because of the cast.
Well, the cast, but then the story, like the storyline,
the subject matter.
The subject line is
it's
very popular. You know what I mean? In a big sort of subset of the country and or the world rather, because wrestling's a big deal for a lot of people.
What's going to be very interesting is if that crowd will show up for an A24 movie.
That's the thing, as they're sort of trying to move into more populist sort of filmmaking and stuff like that. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they do show up. Also, because like the big baddie in the room is the WWE and Vince McMahon, and they're not anywhere near on this film whatsoever. Their stamp of approval is nowhere to be found. It's very much an independent film, and really they're not even mentioned. But the people that are in the film that are kind of mentioned, that are known with them, it's not really painting them as like really great, because the people that ultimately Kevin Von Erich sells all this rights to is essentially a conduit for the WWE, who sold and bought all these rights and tore the sport into a marketing enterprise. But that being said, the Iron Claw, take grandma, take everybody out to the theater and see it. I'm sure she'll have a wonderful time. Buy her a big
When's
coat.
that out, Ryan?
It is out next weekend. It's out the weekend of Christmas. So just
December
in time.
22nd.
December 22nd. A movie that just got out this weekend. Was it this weekend or last weekend? That Wonka. Was this weekend that Wonka came out. It's really, I would usually talk about who else on the team wrote the review, Dan, because we have so many amazing writers. But it was actually our own Erik Anderson who wrote the review. And so, Erik, talk a little bit about your review, what you loved about Wonka, what you didn't. Got to say, I took a peek and edited that review, and it was a really good review, Erik, and it was a lot of fun. So did your review match the film in terms of you having a lot of fun with Wonka?
I had some fun with it. I think it is pretty low tier Paul King, but at the same time, he feels like exactly the right person for it. It was, if you read the review, it's a solid B, which is great. A B is great. It's not an A, and it's not a C. It's a B.
Thank you for explaining the grading system on our website.
I like Chalamet a lot. I think he needed to kind of be pushed further. I said right in the opening, his silly, wacky singing and dancing at LaGuardia has never been really capitalized on for the fun and goofiness and zaniness of it until this. So, and this is such a very, very safe movie that it reins him in just a little bit too much. But I really like him. I thought Olivia Colman, and I'm forgetting the actor that plays Bleacher, who I thought was really, really good. They're basically just doing Les Mis. It's so C grade level Les Mis. Super disappointing, super obvious. And I love Olivia Colman so much. Did not like her in this at all. I did not like Hugh Grant.
No.
I'm sounding like I'm saying all the things that I don't like, even though it's a B score. It just kind of glides along. The songs aren't super memorable. And it's really underlined by the fact that it opens with the strains of Pure Imagination to kind of get you in the mood. And then it closes with Chalamet's version of it. And in between that are all these original songs. And there's such a like a distrust, I think, by closing with Pure Imagination, which is a gorgeous, beautiful song. And all the original songs in the film are pretty forgettable.
I think there's one song that I like.
The centerpiece song when they're opening the chocolate shop is good, and the production design in that moment
really good.
Is so out of this world great, because it's the closest that we get to the 71 version.
Yeah,
but it's so short.
Mm-hmm.
It's cut short narratively by the need to constantly squash Willy Wonka's dreams, that we're cut short too. That needed to be such a huge, giant, long centerpiece, and it gets, I'm like, you spent all that money on that production design and we got it for about 90 seconds.
Yeah. Erik, what did you think of Matt Lucas?
I do not want to talk about that person ever, if I have to, ever.
Okay. Send him a Christmas card.
That could be like an A+ movie, but his existence in it would have brought it down to a B.
Okay. So look out Matt Lucas for a Christmas card from Eric Anderson.
No,
Right.
it's going to be a box of SHIT.
All right. Thank you, Gracie.
A box of quote unquote chocolate.
Yes.
I like
Fudge. Yeah. Dan, Wonka?
Yeah.
Pro Wonka? Nay Wonka?
You know, I'm pro joy in
I would,
general,
Dan,
but
that's
I'm
actually really true. You are pro joy. You are the one on this podcast that always comes here with the most positive attitude. Loves a good laugh. I know this from being with you a
Yeah.
lot.
I
We love to
absolutely
laugh.
do.
One of my favorite moments this year was watching Bottoms with you at South by Southwest.
Yeah,
Man knows how to laugh at a comedy, folks. He loves whimsy. He loves bizarro
I
things.
do. But you
Yeah.
know what I don't love is
Children.
forced joy and
Oh.
forced whimsy.
There we go. Yeah.
And I will risk the ire of the internet and say that I feel like that's what Little Prince Timmy is doing here.
Little
I
Prince Timmy.
I no, look, I love him.
Oh.
I have loved most, if not all, of his performances
Yeah.
in the past. I will tell everyone that he should have won the Oscar for Call Me by Your Name if they ask me. But like, I
Yeah, agreed.
he
DDO.
does.
Phantom Thread.
He is not at the stage in his career yet where he understands how to do stylization. And if you are going to like explicitly make a prequel to Gene Wilder's Willy Wonka, you need to understand stylization because that is all that performance is.
Can I ask Dan, like, real quick?
Mhm.
Do we 100% know that this is a prequel straight
Yes.
to that movie? Is it okay? Because like
Yeah.
they didn't really. No, like
I mean, like I would say that
asking.
even if they
Even if it
haven't said,
wasn't-
I feel like it feels like it is
Yeah,
meant to be.
It
I mean,
and
I felt like it
crystal
was.
clear in the movie too. There isn't really any. It's not obtuse whatsoever. It's
Yeah.
No, I know, but it just feels like obviously they're going to, I guess, just remake that film, and with their own version of Chalamet, or maybe an older version of Chalamet down the road.
I don't know.
I mean, like it just feels like it wants to be its own thing, but like you're saying, Dan, it is tied a lot, and like Eric's saying, to the past.
Yeah.
And it's like I want to be nostalgic, but I want to make my new franchise at the same time. So anyway,
Yeah, and like Eric said, like it is just so in debt to pure imagination. It feels like it almost feels like they adapted not a prequel to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but they adapted Pure Imagination, the song, into a movie. And it's just like I'm sorry, but no one involved is quite at the level of the people who wrote that song, especially on the songwriting front. And when you're going to be calling out a song so blatantly as that, you better have at least one song that can match it. And I don't feel like they do.
No, they definitely don't.
And there are lots of things that I like about this movie. I do think that for all that I just said about I hate forced joy and forced whimsy, I think Paul King mostly knows what he's doing on that front and is able to give this a lightness in at least when it's called for, that I think mostly works. But overall, I just yeah, I don't know. I feel like the movie was telling me to have a good time instead of just having a good time.
I think this
There's
movie's
also too many villains.
there's too
Oh
many,
my
like-
God!
There's
I was like-
too many villains in this.
Oh my God! Pick one.
yeah.
And there are some really interesting ones that I do like. I think Slugworth, Patterson Joseph is absolutely like
Great.
I don't know, just funny and acts really like gay, like he's reading the room. I love that. He is very funny. But yeah, too many villains. there's also a weird thing where Noodle, the young girl that Wonka takes under his wing, and the actress Calla Lane feels too old for that role. She's supposed to be like 12.
I had to tell you, the role felt weird too. Like it.
Yeah, I think it's just the
For her
writing of that
she
role
needed
just
to be
felt
younger.
very.
She needed to be like 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he needed to be like
weird.
He needed to be like older too. Like it felt weirdly almost
Yeah.
relationship-y.
Yeah, I think that was weird that like it felt like he was a teenager in this movie, and I'm
Yeah.
like, surely that cannot be.
No, because he's
But
a
at the
close
same time,
30-year-old actor.
yeah,
You know,
like
it's,
But that's going to plague him for
Yeah.
a long time.
yeah, it'll plague him like Tom Holland for being small, you know, but also childlike faces, you know what I mean, and just the slender frame. No, I get it, but like, I don't know, it felt a little off. I think also though, I like Paul King. I think he's a good director. I think those Paddington movies are amazing and special films, and that's why I'm so worried about the third film, is because he's not. I think he's writing it, but he's not obviously directing it, because he's going to be supposedly making that Fred Astaire movie with Tom Holland, which I'm not looking forward to. I know, but I will say this movie was billed by so many people online to be an absolute train wreck. And from those trailers and everything. And this movie is not that. I said all along that this movie was just going to be fine. And this movie is fine. There's nothing terribly great about it. There's nothing terribly wrong about it. Eric's absolutely right. This is like the definition of like I would go like more like a B-. Like, right? Like a more B-, maybe if you're being mean, a C+. There's honestly, it is. I'm not denigrating your grade. I'm just
no, I'm just saying sometimes the worst thing a movie can be is just fine.
It's fine. Yeah. It's like when Eric goes out to dinner with me and he orders something. It's just fine. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
as we will be discussing about in another couple of minutes.
Yeah, I'm not that everything has to be like a train wreck or a masterpiece, but if it's good if you can at least be leaning in one direction versus the other, because when you're just kind of
in the middle,
it's sure. And I know there's plenty of people that their whole thing is, I want to just watch a movie and turn off my brain. I'm like, that's cool, that's great.
Good for you. Go eat some chocolate and leave me alone.
That's super. You know? That's you are who the CB grade movies are for, and that even sounds meaner than I mean to. But I'm just saying this could have been so much more. It
could have been, but I also think too it could have been far a lot worse. And I think that Chalamet's actually, I don't think he's bad in this movie.
I think he's good.
I mean, Dan, I know that, you know, not like, you know, I don't think it's his best performance or anything like that. But I don't think I think that maybe you're right, Dan, and sort of like he doesn't fully. Maybe the whimsical parts or certain little details that make Wilder's performance so special. He's not Gene Wilder. Like, we can just get over that.
Yeah. He feels like he is doing a very studied version of Gene Wilder, as opposed to Gene Wilder just being his kooky self.
I feel like at times he's a little bit like that, but then I also feel like there are times where he is his own version, and he does feel like, I think it's a performance that ultimately by the end, as Willie is sort of becoming his own self by the end, I think that Chalamet's performance actually kind of grows and gets a little bit better by the end for me. In what we see at the end, which this is why I always hate setup films and I always like the sequels a little bit more for stuff like this. It's like I'm interested to see where he continues, and I did think that some of the musical numbers, while Eric, I can't remember any of them word for word because it's all gobbledygook. I did think well, I guess I can't remember the scrub because it's like, you know, it's like, you know, it's very.
Talks about the whole like supporting cast of the you know.
You mean everybody from Downton Abbey? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The upstairs downstairs of it.
Yeah, the upstairs downstairs of it all. But I thought that was good. I thought the villain, like the Slugworth villains, like trying to persuade Keegan Michael Key with the chocolate. That song was probably the best one. Very good villain song. Yeah, because it's very playful and it's you can tell how much they're having fun, and you can tell like those actors have been on in musical theater and actually like understand the assignment. I think
And also Matt Lucas. So.
yes, and there you go. But I think that you're right, Eric. Like it's got very luscious production design, and but you just don't get to see enough of it. And I think by the end, I was feeling a little underwhelmed in terms of like this is supposed to be a chocolatier, but also a magician at the same time. And I feel like it kind of underwhelms in that aspect of it. But I still think it's like ultimately it's a kids movie. It's totally fine. Like I understand why it's making money because like it's good for kind of holiday movie for the whole family to see. And it's not like anywhere near my top movies of the year, but that's okay. It's like it's just good, disposable, non-disastrous time at the movies, which honestly, given the reactions to the trailer and hiding that it was a musical and everything, and it has now made 150 million worldwide and everything, and it keeps making money. That's actually like a really good sign. And it kind of helps Chalamet's claim as trying to be the next movie star as well with Dune on the horizon. And I know it's IP, but it also helps that his face is all over this thing. And you're selling the idea of he's Willy Wonka. And so if there was a chance to make another one or continue his story, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I would need Paul King behind it, because I do still think that the magic of this film isn't actually the performances or anything. I still think it's Paul King ultimately.
Except a sequel to this movie is
the original. Yeah, I know.
Is the downfall, and it's so funny. At the end of my review, I was like checking myself as I was writing it, and you can sort of see it because I left it in there of like, I don't like, that there's not enough cynicism in this movie. And I'm like, why am I questioning that? Is this me? What's going on here?
Because it's going to happen soon.
Internal conversation that ended up in the review. And because since it is the prequel to the 71 version, and we know that in that version, he is evil and horrible and cynical and bitter and just awful, but also correct, because killing children, totally cool with me. But in this, there is such an intense lack of cynicism that you're like, at what point does this happen? Because it's certainly not happening in here. And we only have the one Oompa Loompa, just Hugh Grant, not the entire legion of slaves that he brings over from Oompa Loompa land, because he's, they get into it a little bit that he is a cocoa bean colonizer. That is who he is.
Thanks a lot, Mom.
He steals things and people.
Thanks a lot, Sally Hawkins.
Yeah, thanks, Sally Hawkins. Exactly. So what would that even be? Would the middle piece between this and the Gene Wilder version would be a horrifying thing to watch, because it would be him bringing these Oompa Loompas over. It would be him turning into this recluse. I don't think people want to see that. Certainly not modern day audiences that are too scared to even watch musicals.
Yep. Well, Wonka's in theaters, and you like that? Wonka's in theaters. You can read the review up on the website by Eric Anderson, and be kind to Wonka out there. Buy some chocolate. I had some chocolate this past week. It was really good. Color Purple. It's the last film we're going to talk about. Movie comes out December 22nd, I believe, as well, with Iron Claw.
Christmas Day.
Or Christmas Day. Sorry. I'm going to need to. Coming out. It's Christmas Day. It's like a Monday. Weird.
Movies opening on Christmas Day is.
I know, but just open on the Friday. It's fine. Nobody wants to open on Friday. Nobody opens on a movie on a Monday.
Just stop.
I'm just telling you, it's not a good move. Anyway, Dan, I'm gonna start with you. Sometime this week, we'll have a review from Dan Bayer, his thoughts on the film. So just curious, Dan, what you thought of the Color Purple?
So I shit you not. My initial like dump all my thoughts onto paper review of this movie was about 5,000 words. Um, and I have spent a lot of time editing it down.
I can't wait to see that.
No one ever needs to see that because it was very messy. But the like my ultimate feeling is this. I think that The Color Purple, the musical, is not a great musical to start with. And I think it's both not a surprise, but also kind of weird that the production that made everyone sort of convinced that it was kind of a good musical and should maybe become a movie musical was the very stripped down, like bare bones version that premiered at the Meunier Chocolate Factory in I think like 2015. 2013 or 14, and then came to Broadway in
Chocolate
2014.
Factory.
Yes, I know. It all comes back to chocolate.
Wonka?
But uh, but it's putting it on screen requires putting back a lot of the visual grandeur and pageantry that slowed down the musical in its original Broadway adaptation. And they've mitigated that by, as they do, cutting out a lot of songs from the show, which is in some ways a good thing, but in some ways not. Um, I I think this movie needed to either embrace being a movie musical more. Whenever people started dancing and singing, I could feel the proscenium just beyond the edge of the frame. It felt like people were putting on a performance for an audience, which, if they had done the musical as written, could have worked because in the musical they have a chorus of um, women in the town who act as this kind of Greek chorus commenting on what's going on. And if you're going to do that, then that sort of visual motif could have worked and felt like a part of the style of this movie. But they took out all of that. And when I saw this film, it was at a screening here in New York where they had the screenwriter uh, give a Q&A after, and he was very eloquent in talking about why they decided to do away with those numbers and how it really felt that they wanted to focus on these central women and characters and being within their perspective. And that's fine and that's great. And that was one of the things that people really appreciated about that 2015 revival were the performances in these parts and how they were allowed to really dive into the psychology of these characters. But because of that, the film kind of gave me whiplash because it has these very artificial stage bound feeling musical numbers next to these in musical parlance we call them book scenes, which are the dramatic dialogue only scenes that are very naturalistic, and these people are working in real subtle, powerful emotional registers. And I think all of the performances are pretty great. I mean, they range from good to really great, but I think most of them are pretty great. Um, but they just can't. It can't. They don't overcome the material itself, and the direction, particularly of the musical numbers, doesn't help. Um, like I said, there are lots of just. I don't think it's a great musical. Part of that is that like the musical should end with "I'm here." That's just it. That is the finale number of this piece. It is, I know it's not the ending of the book, but that is the finale of Celie's emotional arc. That is where it should end, but it doesn't. There's like a whole other scene and musical number after that, and it just should not be. And it's something that has bothered me about this. It's always bothered me about this musical, and I have been on the full journey with this musical. I saw it before it went to Broadway in Atlanta at the Alliance Theater, and then I saw it when it was on Broadway the first time with LaShawne's, and then I saw the revival with Cynthia Erivo, who that is the other problem. When Cynthia Erivo and her performance, her Tony-winning performance as Celie in The Color Purple exists, why do you cast Fantasia in this role? And which is, I do think that Fantasia is very good. She's even better than I had been expecting, honestly, in the dramatic acting scenes in that department. But while I do think that her voice has a lot of character and that helps a lot with these songs, she doesn't quite have the power, that crystal clear, blow you to the back of your seats power that a song like I'm Here really requires in order to land the way it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, there is a very important musical moment of the show that was cut out of the film for Celie, and I understand why they did it, because I don't think it would work as well on screen. But what they do in place of that does not have, again, that soul-stirring emotional impact that it has in the stage show. And I just feel like this is a film that, like, for every, you know, positive that I can say about it, there's also a negative to say about it. And I don't think it's a bad movie, but I think it could have been great, and instead it's just good.
Hmm.
And also, I'm sorry, but that I love Dan Lawson a lot, but that golden filter over every shot in this movie is freaking ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's laughable, especially in that last scene, which is
Ooh.
like it's really beautiful, but it's also like, this is ridiculous. Like the level of saturation of gold is just like the charts.
It's too
Like,
much.
you know how that story about how, there was no pink paint left in the world when they were making the Barbie set. There were no more golden light filters left in the world while they were shooting The Color Purple. All over.
Erik?
Okay. I want to work my way back from Dan's comments, because I agree with like 90% of it, really.
Yeah.
Really the gold filter specifically of the end scene, I actually really liked, because it mirrored the opening scene with them when they were young, which is, I think, the best shot scene in the film. And that, as an opener,
Yes,
I
absolutely.
was like, okay,
Yes.
this is really going to be like Black is King. This is going to have the right kind of like saturated music video quality that feels
And
so huge.
But then it instantly
And then
cuts to these women singing at you, and it's like, oh, everything that was intimate and special about this movie is now gone.
It was yeah, I felt like we were robbed of potential within like the opening moments. But I loved that look, and I do love that he revisits it at the end to connect the two as a bookend. I thought that was great. That being said, the rest of Dan Laussen's cinematography in this, I actually found to be horrific, because there are so many scenes shot inside buildings and at night, and these are very dark-skinned women and men, and they are so underlit that their faces close up even are in shadow most of their numbers, and I found that horrifying and surprising, to say the least. It was, I think it's the film's biggest downfall. um Besides the fact that the musical and the movie adaptation turns Celie into a supporting character in her own story to a degree that is so disappointing, alarming, and bizarre. Everyone gets, all the supporting characters get huge, huge barn burning numbers that are so exciting and so thrilling and so root worthy. I mean, the audience I saw it with was literally out of their seats. It was like being in church. Applause and yelling and whistling, and it was wonderful. And you could
Every time Danielle
feel it.
Brooks was on screen.
Every moment
time.
Danielle Brooks is on.
Every time.
And we get like almost 90 minutes really before Fantasia has anything more than a few like lines of songs to sing. And by the time it does happen, like you said, I'm Here needed to be a Dreamgirls, I'm telling you, I'm not going moment. And it is so muted and understated, shockingly. And it is largely, it's the staging, but it is her voice too. Because I think she's actually quite good in the dramatic scenes of without singing. I think she's quite good.
I especially love her in every scene with Taraji B. Henson.
Yeah.
I think the two of them are so good. And even though the script, I don't like the way the script adapts the relationship between the two of them, but the two of them bring such tenderness to those scenes with each other that it alleviated some of my problems with that.
It did. And even though I think Henson isn't a great casting choice here, I think everybody else is. I think, Danielle Brooks, obviously coming back from playing it already. Coleman Domingo is fantastic. Corey Hawkins is really good. I think Halle Bailey and Felicia Pearl Mapasi are. I could have watched a whole movie of only them.
Felicia Pearl Mapasi is such like dead on casting as young Fantasia. And she is so like a Star is Born, star in the making. She has such big screen presence, big voice. My God. And Halle Bailey, like, she don't need Disney. She don't need Disney and their half-assed attempt to make a movie around her.
Those two were wonderful. I really just thought they were fantastic. Ryan, how about you?
Oh, thank you, Erik, for that lovely transition. There's always a movie every year that the critics or the Oscars or Golden Globes or SAG or whoever, they all nominate, and I sit there and I go, I don't get it. Like I don't because I don't get it. Maybe from a visual standpoint or performance standpoint, storytelling wise. Maybe it's just something that doesn't click with me and it takes me a while, or maybe I didn't like it at all. And it doesn't have to be like the worst thing I've seen that year. It's just something that, of the quality of films that I've seen this year, and an extraordinary quality at that, I may add. When something though is also hyped up for us, it could be led to a massive disappointment. And I think that for the both of you, you guys saw this right as the massive praise was really taking on, and saw it with audiences that really responded to it. And mine was not a similar experience because I did not have a critic screening here at all. So I watched this at home, and because I didn't have a choice. Otherwise, I'd have to wait until the end of Christmas to see it. But that has not stopped me in the past from enjoying films before and really connecting with them. There's a lot of films that I have to catch up on screeners that ended up being in my top 10 over the many years. The Color Purple will not be one of those films because visually speaking, I agree with you, Dan. I think that Louston cinematography is lousy and distracting. And I think that it brings this artificiality to the film that takes me out of it emotionally. And obviously not just having the stage musical in the book, but we also have a previous film iteration of this before and directed by one of the great directors of all time, and Steven Spielberg. And that movie, it's not one of like Spielberg's like top 5. It's still a very good movie. And all those performances are great, and it's a compelling drama, and it's a wonderful story, and it's a great book. And there's a lot of and the story itself of The Color Purple is always one it's a very tough story. And but it doesn't mean that it's not compelling. But the musical numbers here are so distracting in the way that they look visually too, in the way they're sort of choreographed, and at times really very looky at the camera, that it all felt very fake, and it felt very distracting, and it took me out of a lot of the dramatic beats that are supposed to happen in the regular story in the book as opposed to happen in the music. And I don't think that when you talk about Wonka having musical numbers that I don't remember, and I'm not as familiar with the musical as you are, Dan, but for me, as someone that never saw the musical, never heard the music, some of these musical numbers were just forgettable as soon as they ended. And the one in particular that I really don't get the praise for is Danielle Brooks, because I don't think that she's actually the best supporting actress in this film, because I actually disagree with you, Erik. I actually think Taraji P. Henson's gives that scene a lot of light, and there's a lot of energy, and it's at a point of the movie where it needs it because its movie is very slow. But I do think Danielle Brooks is excellent in her scenes in the second half of the film, where it has to be very dramatic, and she really is able to you're able to buy into the character. And that's what's so great about the just the story, is that drama is so hard for you not to be compelled by it. The musical numbers, the way they're constructed, like the Corey Hawkins sequence too, super annoying in the terms of the way it's constructed, and just the lyrics and everything is just like, what are you doing here? Like, there are times it's a movie that feels like, yes, you want to be a musical, but you also want to tell this incredible story of this Pulitzer Prize winning book and everything. And then, yes, to Erik's extremely big point, your lead, who was buried in a lot of the trailers, is buried in this movie by all the supporting performances that are better. And her big moment in the film is not big enough. It's not good enough. And it doesn't able to sell the movie. And I don't think that Fantasia is actually really that good, because I don't know if she's really that good, because I think the film underwrites her a lot of the time. I don't think she's...
No, we know she's that good because we know her as a performer already.
I'm not talking about as a singer. I'm talking about as an actress.
Yeah, I thought she was very good.
I thought she was very one note, sad, quivering, just very closed off, and it plays very one note for the most part. And I know that that's the character.
Kind of silly, though.
It's kind of silly, but it's also, it's just not good, not good enough.
I'll say this
for me.
I'll say this: like on stage, Cynthia Erivo was able to bring this sort of dry humor to Celie, even when she's at her most like wallflower like, that sort of set up her character arc and progression in a way that I don't think Fantasia manages to do in the film.
And I think
So
that's
I
the
can
other
understand
that's the
that.
other thing. So this entire time I thought, okay, well, I'll give her a shot. But every time I heard that Cynthia Erivo won the Tony and had this part, I kept thinking, God, she would knock this out of the park because she's able to elevate. I already know this about Cynthia Erivo. I've seen Harriet. I've seen other films. She's able to elevate pretty bad direction or material or pretty basic material and make it something grand because that's how great of a performer she is. That's why even though I don't like Wicked a lot, like I've got hope because she's incredible. She's an incredible talent. She's one of the most incredible talents we have on the planet. And yeah, that scene, the what's the number again? I'm sorry, the big supposed moment that she's supposed to have.
I'm here.
I'm here. Cool, good for you. Where are you? Because you aren't there. And yeah, by the end, the big emotional scene, Dan, visually, sure, it's probably the one they spent the most time to get the money shot of the tree and all of them, standing around it and the table and everything. It's so gold and white. And yes, I get it. But emotionally speaking, for those characters in those moments, it doesn't earn it, in my opinion. It doesn't earn it.
And too long too.
It's a little too long. And I think that
we just want them to reunite and say,
I don't want them to reunite. Dan's right. The movie should just end with the number with a better actress who can deliver it. And they don't.
Also, I'm sorry, but I needed there to be a Sierra on the soundtrack when she came in because I did not recognize her at all. And when I saw her name in the credits, I was like, wait, what?
My audience was flipping out because they knew and they're like, wait a minute. also her too is not recognizable because
completely unrecognizable.
Because as a performer, she looks nothing like her character, who looks like a child.
Yeah, and that's just the thing. There's
she kind of is a child in it, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she is kind of a
fair,
child,
I guess.
Fair, I guess. But I don't know. It's just a lot of technical, at times baffling decisions, and a screenplay kind of at odds with each other. That the performers do the best they can. I think that you're right, Eric. Coleman Domingo is really good here. Hawkins is doing the best he can. You know what I mean?
Oh, Dion Cole. Holy crap.
Oh, Dion Cole.
Oh my God.
Terrifying. Talk about somebody who I did not recognize right off the bat.
Yeah.
Because I was just so terrified of him.
Yeah.
He was excellent.
Yeah. And I think that there's just a movie just that it's mixed for me. It has some good things that I like. It has some things that it kind of feels like when you take all the pieces of all the things that everyone's all talked about, Dan's all the different iterations of the musical and everything. And they're like, we're going to do this from this version of it and this version of it and this revival and all this different things and the movie and the book and all this stuff. And you're trying to jam it all together, but then it actually doesn't get to just be the thing that I'm supposed to see here, which is the musical version of this beloved story. And I feel like the movie is so at odds with itself. It's fighting its own self to be something cohesively great and had, like you're mentioning, Dan, all this potential. But ultimately, there's so many. I think for every step forward, there's 2 steps back. And in terms of maybe there's a good performance. Well, there's a bad one here, and also the lighting here sucks. Or yes, the camera, the editing here is not as good in this sequence as it is in this one. Or the camera moves in a weird way here. Why is it doing that? Like, why are they looking so much at the beginning of this movie and all the musical sequences? Why does it look so fake? Why does it look like it's downstage? Why are they looking so directly at the camera? And I'm just like, why are we not using this space? It feels like the space is not used at times. I'm so tired of this with goddamn movie musicals of not using the fucking space that they have. It's like an ongoing thing.
Yeah, without that giant record player.
No,
Okay,
that was space.
No, it's both the problems I had with both this and Wonka, where it's like, it feels like you're mentioning, Eric, with Wonka earlier. It's got this giant chocolate factory created, and we spend like 2 seconds in it. That's what this whole thing kind of feels like. You know,
I can tell you, my audience was not asking any of those questions or thinking about any of that whatsoever.
well, good for them, but most of them probably aren't voters. You know, or
But I know,
you know.
but that's we're talking about reviewing the movie. We're not
Yeah,
talking.
yeah, yeah. Or normies.
We're talking about the movie, the how we feel about it, and I'm just telling you what they were feeling was everything that the movie wanted them to feel. Every moment, every single step, tears, laughter, applause, every bit of it was there for them.
Yeah.
And it's a case where, like, for people who have that emotional reaction to the movie, I can't fault them really. Like, it's a case where, like, genuinely, I'm happy for you that you got that out of this movie, because I didn't, and I did when I saw it on stage, and I wish I had gotten that from this movie, but it's just not there. And even if I take, because it's been 8 years since I saw it on Broadway. Like, I'm far enough removed from it that I don't remember enough specifics other than I felt this way after seeing it. And so, like, it's not like the movie was directly competing with this, or I have this fresh in my mind that I'm taking notes on every place that it deviates, from what I saw previously. It doesn't, for me, have the same emotional impact, and I think it does come from it not really knowing fully how to be a movie musical, how to adapt what worked on stage to the screen in a way that makes us feel the same things.
Yeah. And I mean, like, obviously too, it also, the audiences, a lot of that I've seen, a lot of them are audiences with African-American audience members, and it's an experience that could be very specific to them, and they connect with them in a lot of ways. It also, you have people that love this book and have loved it for so many years and have loved this musical and have loved the original film, and that this is a block of IP too. I mean, it also, when you also then hear that cast talk about their experiences, or you hear the process of it being made, there's a lot of beautiful stories that are being told. I mean, like Fantasia's story, or Corey Hawkins talking about giving Daniel Brooks her flowers for the performance that it has sort of gone viral, and just how emotionally connected they all are to this story. It's a very timeless story. There's no question about it. For me though, it just didn't, this iteration of it did not connect for me the way that the book did. And I've read the book, and it's a beautiful book. And or even the original Spielberg film, which has its flaws as well too. That's not a perfect film, but it's still very good. And there's a lot about it that I like. And I think it is because, I don't know, maybe it is because the subject matter is so serious that the fantastical elements to me take me out of it. And I'm not usually ever like this when it comes to musicals. Like, anything could be made into a musical I'm never sort of like that, but it just felt a little, like you said, Dan, it felt jarring of an experience, and I've never seen it before like this. And I actually would be curious to see it on stage, because I think more of that when you're going in and sort of expecting it, and obviously it could be a different experience, and some things are taken out of a movie and that are made directly for the stage.
Well, yeah, when you're going to see a stage musical, you are not staring at the faces of the people singing.
Yeah, no, you're like probably in the back. You know what I mean? So
versus the movie,
faces.
I know it's different, but it just, I just wanted to articulate that it just, I wanted to feel very, like, I never want to not go into a movie and not either like it, or especially one that's supposed to really connect with you. And it just, I felt that so many of the decisions made behind the camera, just prevented from what we saw on the screen to ultimately get there for me. But I understand that I think it's going to make a good chunk of money at the box office and do very well for itself. And it does very much have an awards path for its for Brooks and for Fantasia to get into the actress race. I mean, Brooks is in sort of is in a race for supporting actress. It could definitely get maybe some craft nominations in picture, or it could just get maybe just picture in a couple of acting noms. We never know. I mean, like the Globes Day could definitely happen. Critics' Choice could definitely happen where it just gets in a couple. Like, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, do you guys have anything else you want to say real quick? Or
Yeah, I just like I also love the book, and I'm still waiting for an adaptation of the book to um feel as bold as that book felt
yeah,
in its explicit talking about things that we do not talk about
yeah,
in society. And every iteration that I've seen of it, the Spielberg film, multiple versions of the stage show, and now this film of the stage show, it is Alice Walker's story, but it's also flattened.
yeah,
It doesn't feel as um vibrant or bold or awful or as true as her novel. And I think that's in large part because there's something that you read in the privacy of your own area, if you're your own like personal bubble, they are allowed they're allowed to push more social kind of boundaries. You can talk about masturbation and rape and all these awful things, or awful private things that Seeley talks about in the novel. You can talk about those things in a novel that in a way that you can't when you're making something for like mass group
yeah.
viewing,
You
at
can.
least in
It's kind of
American
hard to like
society.
adapt it. Yeah,
Yeah, and there is part of me that feels like if you cannot commit to how um visceral that novel is in your adaptation, then maybe you shouldn't be adapting it because that's such an important part of the novel. But then on the other hand, I look and I see how people react to this story and react to the arc, even without, the explicitness of Alice Walker's novel, and they still, come away very emotionally affected. So maybe that doesn't matter so much, but I feel like it's worth mentioning that our uh, musicals and cinema still have a long way to go to catching up to the permissiveness that we allow in books, and I wish that we would get there already.
for sure. Totally agree. The Color Purple will be out December 25th, even though it should be out the Friday before and make the money. But release it on a Monday, sure.
You know what? I appreciate that Warner Brothers is putting all of its money literally into the holiday basket.
Yeah. Well,
Wonka and Aquaman and The Color Purple, all in December. They have gone all in.
and they're
And
like,
you know what?
we're just gonna give
Best of
you
luck.
all the
Best of luck.
movies. We'll see which one breaks through.
Yeah.
We already have all the money from Barbie. What else do we need, right? Dan, can you tell everybody where they could find you and all your work?
Yeah, you can find me on the social media website formerly known as Twitter at Dance and Dan on film, also on Letterboxd and post at Dance and Dan.
Dan, quick thoughts on Ferrari.
Uh no one should ever let Shailene Woodley do an accent ever again.
That's the correct take. Thank you very much, Dan. Eric Anderson.
I love you, Shailene. I'm sorry.
Eric, where can we find you on the internet?
On Twitter at awards_watch, awards watch everywhere else, awardswatch.com. Subscribe to the newsletter. December Oscar predictions are coming out now, right before the holidays. It is mania because critics groups are announcing like 6 a day. It's a lot. I don't know what sleep is. Please help me.
Erik, quick thoughts on Ferrari.
Exactly what Dan said. Vroom, vroom, bitches, and get Shailene Woodley out of the accent game immediately.
There you go. That's the correct choice again. All right. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Ryan McQuade 77. You can find all my work here at AwardsWatch.com. Go to the website. You can click it. You can read it all. I've got some great interviews from the last couple of weeks. Charles Milton of May December, Jeffrey Wright of American Fiction, Cillian Murphy. Hopefully have some fun stuff coming your way in January after the holidays. If you like podcasts, Director Watch, that's a thing we do. Where myself and Jay Ledbetter, we've been talking about the films of Paul Thomas Anderson. This week's episode will be about Inherent Vice. Next week's episode will be about Phantom Thread with our own Sophia Simonello. And then the last episode will be about Licorice Pizza with our own Dan Bayer here. So that'll be a bunch of fun that we do. I'm only saying that because we probably will not have a show next week. We definitely won't have a show next week because it's the holidays and Eric's got to sleep. What is sleep, right? Also, while you're at the website, since Erik refused to mention it, I'll mention, go sign up for the newsletter that Erik puts together twice a week. Did you? I thought you didn't say it.
That was like the first thing I said.
Okay, well, I'm going to say it again.
I remembered.
You put all the work into it, all the time, all the effort into the newsletter. And so, yeah, go ahead and sign up for that thing. It's the best way to get all of our stuff twice a week. And you also get a bunch of cool other things sent your way. If you like the podcast, again, also Spotify and iTunes 5-star reviews, only 5-star reviews. Otherwise, you get coal for the holiday season, and nobody would fucking want that.
Actually, if you can write a really awesome 1-star review, I'm here for it, and I will make Ryan feature it on the podcast.
If it's about Erik,
I would prefer
only.
5. Prefer 5.
Yeah, I would like it prefer 5 too. We don't need 1-star reviews. What the hell are you doing?
Don't misread that.
No, you give it 5 stars.
Yeah, give it 5.
Give it 5 stars, but then write a scathing review about us. That's actually just as good.
Just about Ryan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's fair. I need something for therapy this week. But anyway, thing about Ferrari is, yes, Shailene Woodley's accent's god awful. But movie kind of rules. Vroom vroom. Michael Mann makes good movies. I don't know what to tell you. Next week we'll be off. Following week we're gonna be doing something different. It'll be our end of the year show. We usually bring everybody in here and talk about favorite stuff of the year, but instead we're just gonna bring everybody in here in different times and talk about as a group our favorite films of the year. That might just be like Erik by himself with myself. That might be Dan just by himself with me, or it might be they might have some friends along the way that agree with the same films that they like. Then maybe we'll have a little bit of discussion afterwards. Who knows? We're getting into the new year. You're going to have a bunch of different podcasts coming out. We're going to have some bonus episodes of a Director Watch that include a PTA award show, as well as also a May December episode. So you have plenty of podcasts to listen to. Don't get greedy. It's the holidays. We're doing the best we can. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.